Okay guys, so I'm finally going to do the meatloaf video that you all have been waiting for. I've gotten many requests on how to make meatloaf, so I'm going to show you how I make my meatloaf. You're going to need ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, barbecue sauce, minced garlic, a can of diced tomatoes, 2 eggs, breadcrumbs, and milk. Now these are all the things that you're going to need to make my meatloaf. Okay, this is the way I make my meatloaf. If you don't have minced garlic, you can use a garlic clove, chop it up into really small pieces. Same thing with the diced tomatoes. You can get a tomato, only use half of the tomato and dice it up into really small pieces. For the seasons, you're going to need thyme. I put thyme in my meatloaf, black pepper. You can use salt or seasoned salt, but I use celery salt to give it that celery flavor. I use a little bit of garlic powder and Lipton onion soup mix. That's the way my grandmother made it. Okay, you're going to need a green pepper, and you're going to need an onion. Make sure you have a large size onion, and you're only going to be using 1/4 of the green pepper. You're also going to need some butter. Now again guys, this is the way that my family made it growing up. I'm not really a big meatloaf fan, to be honest. You have to make it really good in order for me to enjoy it, but I know a lot of people love it. And since you guys wanted to see how I make my meatloaf, I decided to do this video, even though meatloaf is not my favorite thing to make. But I do know how to make it pretty good. You want to chop your onions up into pretty small pieces. Okay? So I know that the onions are supposed to be pretty small. So you want your onions to look like that right there. And you want your green peppers to be small as well. Now, you don't have to chop the vegetables up too small, because when we add them to the frying pan, because what I do is I fry my vegetables when I'm making meatloaf. Okay, and I don't like to bite into really big chunks of vegetables, so I like to chop my vegetables up into really small pieces. But you don't have to worry about that, because when we fry them, vegetables shrink once you fry them. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. But that's the way you want to chop up your onions and green peppers. Just want to show you guys how I chop mine up. I make meatloaf once in the blue moon. If a friend will come over or I have company and they, you know, say, Jay, can you make some meatloaf? You know, and I don't hate it, but it's just not, you know, one of my favorite things to eat. I make it once in the blue moon. Once in the blue moon, like once a year or something like that. You want to get a pan, you're going to place it over high heat. If you have numbers on your dialer, place it on about a 7 or 8. You're going to add about 1/4 stick of butter, and you're going to add your vegetables to the frying pan. And we're going to allow these vegetables to cook for about 7 minutes until we get that cooked look. I'll show you how they look when they're done, for those of you who don't know. Alright, and you're going to add 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. You don't want to add too much of that. Like I said, if you don't have minced garlic, you can get a garlic clove, a fresh piece of garlic, and just dice it up into really small pieces. Don't add too much. Garlic is really strong. It'll ruin the meatloaf and overpower it with that garlic taste if you add too much. Alright, and the reason that I fry my vegetables, I don't know how anybody else do it, but my people used to fry their vegetables, is because if you don't fry the vegetables, when you bite into the meatloaf, the vegetables are going to taste kind of raw, because they don't really cook much on the inside of the meatloaf. So they have a tendency to still be pretty raw once the meatloaf is done, and I don't like that raw taste, so I usually fry my vegetables first. You're going to get your ground beef. Some people like to use ground chicken or ground turkey, and you're going to add that to a big bowl. This is our mixing bowl that we're going to be mixing and combining all of the ingredients in. You're going to add your ground beef to the bowl, or fresh ground beef. And later on this year, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make homemade hamburgers, and this is sort of the way I make my hamburgers. I just leave out a few ingredients, but a lot of the ingredients I'm using to make my meatloaf, this is what I use to make my hamburger. You're only going to use 1 teaspoon of all of these seasons. So 1 teaspoon of celery salt, about 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of black pepper. You don't want to over season this. Alright? You want to get enough flavor from the vegetables and the sauces. And you're going to use maybe about a half a teaspoon at a time. You don't want to use much of that at all. And you're going to use 1 pack of the Lipton onion soup mix. That gives it a lot of flavor. And they even have like some dried onions in the pack. That's what that white stuff is, dried onions. Okay. And I like to combine and stir in the seasons a little bit first before adding the other ingredients. So I'm just going to stir that up a little bit like that. Just a little bit. Just want to stir the season in a little. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add our other ingredients. And we're going to add our cooked onions and green peppers and a little bit of minced garlic that's in there. Going to add that to the ground beef. Okay. We're going to add our Worcestershire sauce. And you're going to add about 2 tablespoons of that. Add about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And you're going to add your 2 eggs. Okay. And what the eggs are going to do is the eggs are going to help combine the meat so that it stays in place. Okay. And the Worcestershire sauce, as you guys know, I add that to any beef recipe. If anything that has beef in it, I'm going to use Worcestershire sauce because it enhances that beef flavor. Alright. And you're going to add some ketchup. I added about 2 tablespoons there. And I always end up adding a little bit more later on, but I start off with 2 tablespoons. With the diced tomatoes, you're only going to use about 1/4 cup of diced tomatoes, about 4 tablespoons worth. But what you want to do first is you want to drain the juice out of the can of diced tomatoes. Alright, so make sure you drain the juice out of the diced tomatoes before adding the 1/4 cup of diced tomatoes. You don't want to add a lot of diced tomatoes, just about 1/4 cup. That's 4 big tablespoons worth. And we're going to combine that, blend that in. And you don't want to stir it too hard or be too rough with it or stir it too much, because that's going to result in your meatloaf coming out very tough. So as you can see, I only stirred it about 4 times. We're going to add a 1/2 cup of milk, and the milk is going to keep the meatloaf really tender. It's going to make it tender. And you're going to add 3/4 cups of breadcrumbs. 3/4 cups of breadcrumbs. Alright, so we're going to blend that in. Make sure that's well blended. And that's the way you want it to look. You want it to look like that. So now I'm going to get a baking pan, and I'm going to add my ground beef to the baking pan, and I'm going to shape it into a meatloaf shape. Okay. And we're going to be adding some things to the baking pan. And what you want to do around this time is probably preheat your oven. So turn your oven to about 350 degrees before you do this. Alright. So that's the way the meatloaf look after shaping it into the shape of a meatloaf. Want to look like that. Just like that. Look good, don't it? Look pretty cool. Alright. I love the ingredients that I add to my meatloaf. I make the best meatloaf. The best meatloaf. Okay, so you're going to get a bowl. Into the bowl, you're going to add some barbecue sauce and ketchup. All right. And that's what we're going to cover our meatloaf with. All right. That's our beef broth. Going to use a little bit of that. Pour a little bit of that at the bottom of the pan. You can use about 1/4 cup of beef broth. Going to place it in the oven and bake it for about an hour, maybe an hour and 10-15 minutes. And this is the way it came out, guys. This is the final result to your meatloaf. This is the way it looked. Don't it look good? It tastes pretty good. Like I said, I'm not a meatloaf fan, but it came out tasting pretty good. It tastes as good as it looked, trust me. Tasted pretty good. Like the way it came out. Look at that. It was very flavorful with all of the ingredients that I added. Now, a lot of people don't add the ingredients that I add, but you know, that's no surprise. You guys know, watching my cooking channel, that I always do things a little different, and I have a unique style and way of cooking. So I always add different ingredients than the average person, you know. I always think outside the box. I'm a little more versatile. So, you know, instead of adding just ketchup, I add a little barbecue sauce to mine. A lot of people don't use diced tomatoes, but I like the taste that it give the meatloaf, so I use diced tomatoes, and instead of regular salt like most people, I use celery salt, give it that celery flavor, just to add additional flavor to the meatloaf, and it comes out pretty good, you know. And it's good to eat most of it on the first day. So if you're only making it for yourself, make sure you don't make a lot, because after it sits in the refrigerator, it kind of stiffen up. That's why I add milk to it, to make sure that it'll stay tender for days. Meatloaf is not like other foods that taste better after the second and third day. For just my personal opinion, I think it tastes best the first day, not the second, third, and fourth day. Stiffens up, and you know, maybe that's because I already don't really care for it too much. But this is the way it looks. This is some good meatloaf. You know, it looks really good. And I hope you guys like the video. Try it. Tell me how you like it. Tell me how it tastes. But this is meatloaf right here, baby. It's how you make some good old meatloaf. It's really good with potatoes or white rice. Really good with potatoes and white rice. Alright. So try this recipe out. I know you guys been asking for a very long time. How you make meatloaf, Philly Boy J? How you make meatloaf? How you make meatloaf? There you go. That's how I make my meatloaf, okay? I don't know how anybody else make their meatloaf, you know, because I know sometimes people come on my videos and they say things like, you know, you don't make it the standard way, or you don't make it the way that I see most people make it. That's because I'm unique, and that's why my food come out tasting the best, because I do things differently and I step outside the box. I'm very creative with my cooking. My cooking style is very creative, and my food tastes really good because I experiment a lot, and I use different seasons and try different ways to make stuff. All right, so I hope you guys like it. That's how I make my meatloaf. Try it. Follow it step by step. Follow my instructions, and tell me what y'all like, guys. Tell me if y'all like it or if y'all not. Give me some honest opinions. All right, love you guys. I hope this helps. Peace. Enjoy your day.